have an accent? I didn't know.
So pleased to have them with us, ladies and gentlemen, Sandler and Young.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tony Sandler and Ralp Young.
Just a travel along, sing a song, side by side.
Yeah, I'll tell you something, Sandler and Young.
When love comes in and takes you for a spin. Ooh, la, la,
The Tony Sandler Podcast, the story of the amazing career from the man himself.
It was a very good year.
And now, Tony Sandler.
Estoy muriendo de...
Please welcome Mr. Tony Sandler.
How do you feel about swinging down memory lane one more time?
When hearts are passing in the night, in the lonely night, then they must hold each other tight, oh so very tight, and take a chance that in the light, in tomorrow's light, they'll stay together, so much in love. And in the silence of the mist, of the morning mist, when lips are waiting to be kissed, longing to be kissed, where is the reason to resist and deny a kiss that holds a promise of happiness? Though yesterday still surrounds you with a warm and precious memory, maybe for tomorrow we can build a new dream for you and me. This flow we feel is something rare, something really rare. So come and say you wanna share, wanna really share the beauty waiting for us there, calling for us there, that only loving can give the heart. When life is passing in the night, in the rushing night, a man, a woman in the night, in the lonely night, must take a chance that in the light, in tomorrow's light, they'll be together, so much in love. Together, so much in love. So tell me you're not afraid to take the chance, really take a chance. Let your heart begin to dance, let it sing and dance to the music of a glance, of a fleeting glance, to the music of romance, of a new romance. Take a chance.
Yeah, at that time, Arne, you have to understand that a critic could kill you.
Right.
He could make or break you. A critic like Earl Wilson could have made a Broadway show or break it.
He was out of New York.
Imagine what's happening. Ed Sullivan writes in the paper, caught Sandler and Young at the Persian Room. They're terrific. That's all he wrote.
That's all it took.
So that's all it took.
Yeah.
Now, Earl Wilson wrote a phenomenal, the intricacy of our act and the musicality of everything, you know, and there was a fear amongst entertainers, a fear of critics.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, they could make or break you. There was a saying going around in Vegas about critics. The comedians say, critics are like eunuchs in a cat house. They see how it's done, they know how it's done, but they can't muster it themselves.
Oh, that's so
well,
right on.
Well, I got this one in there. I'm so happy, Mark.
Slow down, you move too fast. You gotta make the morning last. Kicking down the cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy.
Now, when you're performing with Polly, you're performing a lot of numbers just as Sandler and Young. Not all of them are with Polly.
Yeah, we had Ocelot. She walked on first, then she introduced us. The If I recall well, we did a number with her, and then she walked.
She had costume
for
changes.
a costume
Yeah.
change. She gave us like 20 minutes. Ralph and I did our thing. She came back on stage. She did her 20 minutes, and then the final was the three of us
Right.
together. On top of that, because of her husband's connections in Broadway and
Hollywood.
in Hollywood, we continuously had the biggest names in our audience. I mean, the biggest stars came to
Yeah.
see us.
And you got to know
He-
several of them at that time.
I mean, Freddie Fields probably twisted their arm and said, if you don't come, you don't get a role. I don't know how that works. But they were there, and they enjoyed it, and we met all those people. I met the Kirk Douglases and the Edward G. Robinsons, and you name them. I mean,
Margaret Whiting, I think, was at that
Margaret Whiting was
show.
a lovely one.
And you performed with her, didn't you?
Yeah, but her father had written a lot of songs, and later in my life, and we'll talk about it. That's going to be our 250th podcast, I guess.
Right.
If we live that long. I did the life of Maurice Chevalier, and so Whiting, her father wrote quite a few songs that Maurice Chevalier recorded.
Well, he wrote a ton of songs.
Margaret knew that I tackled Maurice. Margaret Whiting, a great singer and a great girl.
Yeah.
So I did a show with her and Garrison Keillor at the Guthrie here in Minneapolis. Yeah.
You met Sammy Kahn. Did we mention that before?
Sammy.
Yeah.
Sammy wrote a lot of big hits. Sammy Kahn was a good friend of Ralph's.
Was he really? Oh, they probably met in New York when Ralph was doing demos.
Don't forget, Ralph was a New Yorker and knew all those people. He knew Gary Morton. Gary Morton, who was
Lucille Ball's
husband.
He was wasn't Desi Arnaz her first husband?
Desi Arnaz was Lucille's first husband, and Gary Morton was Lucille's husband when we were invited to Lucille's house. Ralph and I and our wives were invited. Lucille Ball was really a terrific woman. I loved her. She came several times to see us, by the way.
Oh,
yeah, she made it a point. See.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And Gary Morton was her husband. And Gary Morton was an old friend of Ralph's. So that whole clique.
From New York.
New York, yeah. Yeah, that's the way, we were integrated in that business.
Part of that whole club. You were becoming part of that whole club.
Oh, the club.
Well,
Le club.
It's true. It's kind of a fraternity kind of relationship.
Is it a fraternity?
Yeah.
Well, we were,
You were accepted. I think
we became top of the line entertainers at the period 60s, 70s, and early 80s.
You were part of the buzz,
and we're accepted by this whole club.
Won't you come home, Bill Bailey? Won't you come home? She mows the whole night long. I'll do the cooking, honey. I'll pay the rent. Lord knows I've done you wrong. Remember that rainy evening you threw me out with nothing but a fine tooth comb. I know I'm to blame, and it's such a shame. Bill Bailey, Bill Bailey, Bill Bailey, come on home.
that's probably when you met Jerry Lewis also.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Jerry, Jerry invited us to his house. He had built a whole studio. This guy was crazy actually, with sound and all kinds of stuff.
You talked about that, how an enviable studio actually.
And everything was built with his name on it.
Oh, really?
Built especially for Jerry Lewis.
Sure.
And I said, Jerry, that must have cost a fortune. He said, yep. But he was a peculiar guy, Jerry. He was always so proud, Marna, when he talked to me, that he was such a favorite in France, and he was.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Jerry Lewis was his films were favorites in France. The French loved Jerry Lewis. Well, the Americans too, but
Well, that's interesting because I always wonder, how does humor translate? How on earth did they do that? It had to be subtitles.
well, it's like John Wayne in a Western talking French or German.
Or German. I saw that in German. I went.
Yes,
It was the
that's kind of
funniest
funny. You see John Wayne walking and he said, "Oh non, à ce moment-là, on ne peut pas faire ça. Non, non, non." It just doesn't gel, does it?
No, but humor is especially difficult to translate. So that's amazing. So after you had this big build-up, and then a bit of a downer. Actually, more than a bit of a downer.
Well, yeah, but
And then-
that downer didn't last much.
It didn't. No, because all of this is happening very, very quickly.
And especially when Val came in at the Concord Hotel, and then the promise of all those new contracts, and quickly they came in. The Drake in Chicago, the Blue Room in the Shoreham in Washington.
In Washington, D.C.
Was a famous nightclub. Then in New Orleans. What was the
that the Blue
that's a
Room?
Fairmont in New Orleans
Blue
called
Room.
the Blue Room, and then San Francisco had a Fairmont where we performed also.
Right.
So
Beautiful room there. Yeah.
those were the class nightclubs, and that became our circuit.
The Persian room.
I hope I can tell that joke, and nobody will be upset here if I tell that joke. I hope so. So we're at the Blue Room in New Orleans, and at the Fairmont. And a week before, Louis Armstrong had been performing there for a week. So we were after Louis Armstrong, or a couple of weeks after Louis Armstrong. Did Sandler and Young there for a week. And the story was around that they had given Louis Armstrong a room in the back of the hotel. And there was a two-story building extension of the hotel, and on the second floor in the back, they had given Louis Armstrong that room.
It was during segregation still.
Well, I don't know, segregation. Was it?
Anyway.
Must have been in the years that we were, you know.
Yeah.
So here is Louis Armstrong, and he is a fresh air nut, Louis. And he has his room on the second floor. And before he went to do his set in the nightclub, he opened his window. In the front of that window was a large tree. So he leaves his room, he does his 45 minutes, plays his fabulous trumpet, and then goes back to his room. When he walks into his room, he opens the door, and there's a raccoon sitting on his bed.
Oh, jeez.
That's a true story. A raccoon is sitting on his bed. So Louis, very carefully, not to frighten the animal, against the wall, edges his way against the wall to get to the telephone. Picks up the phone and calls the front desk, and he said, "Sir, there's a coon in my bed." And the guy said, "Well, sir, hold on, we got that nigger out of there." No, he said, "This is the nigger talking. There's a coon in my bed." And that's a true story.
Oh, that's precious.
So you're gonna cut that one, aren't you?
Oh, my goodness.
Right, you son of a gun, Dave.
Plein soleil, sand and sea, plein soleil, sea and sand, et la ville and the war et tout bright sun engourdi up above de sommeil, summer day, au soleil, happy days de midi with my love.
Then that fall, you again performed at the Persian Room, and I think that was a booking through Val Irving at that time.
Yes, and that was then Sandler and Young, not Polly Bergen anymore. Polly had seen what we did, and she said, "Boys, you're on your own. You're stars on your own. What? I don't need to help you anymore."
Wow.
Polly was a terrific woman. And so, yes, on the 18th of August, 1966, I remember it because it's my birthday, Ralph and I were starring at the Persian Room.
And that's so incredible because it was just 3 years earlier that you had your meeting with Fred Apcar. To talk about coming to the United States, where he contracted you to come to the United States.
Yeah.
So within those 3 years, you zipped to the top, which is really remarkable, Tony. It really,
well,
really
it is because don't forget, I was born a little boy out of a family of 8, fourth of 8 in Flanders, Belgium. I mean, what?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm frolicking with the Hollywood stars and starring on the Vegas Strip. That's a bit far-fetched, I guess.
But this blossomed into a whole hugely busy schedule. Suddenly, television was asking for you all over the place.
I mean, like Ralph was 16 years older than me, and it was murderous for me. So I know what Ralph went through for
an incredible
in 20
schedule,
years.
right.
Yeah, what it is in this business. You have to do it or not. You cannot be.
Yeah.
You do it or you don't, and that's all there is to it.
And I want to remind the listeners that was on your birthday. It was your 33rd birthday, and that is exactly what the Gypsy Woman had predicted. Did it? I think that's just so amazing. And I know that you poo-poo that kind of stuff, but did it occur to you?
It's not that I poo-pooed it. I thought about it later on. I said, "Wow, didn't she say when you're 33 years old?" And yeah, so I don't poo-poo it. I just don't know how to explain it.
It's just remarkable.
I mean,
it just sends chills up and down your spine.
Yeah, you think so?
That she had told you that much over a decade earlier, and that came to pass. I think that is just incredibly
thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Marna. Hey, by the way, you look great again today.
Tony, I think you've performed in every possible venue that one could perform in the world, actually.
Yes, Marna, and it was always my duty to make it look easy. People don't have to know your problems, that you travel, that you're hiding a cold, or that you are half sick, or that you have diarrhea. I mean, you have to hide it all, and that's the tough part, really. But it's for audiences. They walk, they come in, they pay. It's gotta look easy.
And I believe
simple.
In reading comments from the critics and from your audiences, you always did make it look easy. You always, both you and Ralph, were always warm and charming with your audiences. The audiences trusted the performances that you gave. No matter how famous you became, you were always so authentic, so genuine.
We were probably grateful. I'm still grateful of my life.
But that's wonderful. It didn't go to your head, I think. You remembered where you came from and were grateful. You just didn't assume that that's the way it is. You didn't flaunt it.
No.
Rudyard Kipling wrote a poem and made it. That was the song for Eric on Broadway. I
believe. I was made aware of that by Ralph as we were going on looking for songs and material, substantial stuff, and I was raised with Balzac, La Fontaine, Molière in France, where I was reading all their scriptures and all their stuff. And here I come to the United States, and Ralph said, there's this guy, Kipling, that wrote that fantastic poem called If. Kipling wrote it for his son to guide him through trials and tribulations of life.
It's a beautiful, beautiful poem.
And we adapted that, and that was our closer for many years, actually, Sandler and Young. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, and make allowance for their doubting you.
If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about leading lives or being hated. Don't give way to hating. And yet, don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master. If you can think and not make thoughts your aim. If you can meet with triumph and disaster. And treat those two imposters just the same.
I think that is such a beautiful poem. It's so meaningful. I think it's something everyone should commit to memory.
If people lived by Kipling's if, there would be no war, there would be no envy, there would be no killing, there would be no nothing. I mean, it would be a utopia. So that's why. But if you sing that song and people listen to it, usually the reaction was almost anticlimactic at times, because you fill all those fantastic ideas in people's heads as they sit there listening to you. And there's kind of where you would have tremendous applause, let's say. There's like a hesitation first, and then the realization. It's kind of
I think the message is still sinking in at the end of the song.
Yes, and I felt that many times.
Yeah.
To the point that I say, is that a closer actually?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but we use it very effectively. Yes.
Well, it's beautiful, and I think it speaks a lot about your approach to your career, to your success. I think it about your approach to the contours, the ups and downs of your path.
Well, I was always mindful of being prepared and doing the best possible job, because I greatly appreciated always the fact that people paid the money, drove their cars, stood in line, and did all the stuff to come and see me. Come on now. I mean, it's very simple.
But it's wonderful that you feel that way.
I mean, it's just, it was just natural. And Ralph was the same, actually.
Yeah.
You know, so... that's...
I think that's why, I mean, so many reasons your fans just adore you.
Today, those young kids, they take that stuff for granted. They think they're King Kong. I mean, it just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me.
7 lonely days make one lonely week. 7 lonely nights make one lonely me. Ever since the time you told me we were through, 7 lonely days I cried and cried for you. Oh, my darling, you're crying. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo. There's no use in denying I cried for you. It was your favorite pastime, making me blue. Last week was the last time I cried for you.
On the next episode of the Tony Sandler podcast.
And you were on the Milton Berle show several times, weren't you?
Yes, of course, yeah. But there was Milton Berle, and there was, remember Henny Youngman?
Henny Youngman, oh yeah.
The king of the one-liners. You know, where do you think all those one-liners, like the doctor said to his patient, you have 6 months to live, and the patient didn't pay his bill, the doctor gave him another 6 months. Where do you think they came from?
To learn more about the Sandler and Young Legacy Collection, head to sandlerandyoung-legacy.com. The Tony Sandler Podcast is a TSLS production, engineered and edited by Digital Engine Media, Minneapolis. Subscribe to the Tony Sandler Podcast through your favorite podcast provider and receive updated episodes right when they're released.
Last week was the last time I cried for you. Last 7 lonely days, lonely weeks. 7 lonely nights, make one lonely me. Toutes les petites choses qui manquent. Ever since the time you told me we were through. 7 lonely days I cried.